right, here we are, week 14, chapter 14 of the book of Mark. I know many of you guys are going back to school and you're dreading it, and I'm here to tell you, get over it. You're gonna be fine. It's good for you, and God will meet you there. So be positive instead of negative, and enjoy the school year. But even as you're starting the school year, we still have a few more weeks before Wednesday nights, Awana, youth groups start. So I want to encourage you to continue to keep reading through the book of Mark. And we're getting to the good part of the book of Mark. We're getting towards the end, starting in chapter 14, which is a long chapter. We see the beginning of the end for Jesus. We see that he is with the disciples in the upper room. He institutes the new covenant. He institutes the Lord's Supper and all of that. We see that he goes to the Garden of Gethsemane and he's troubled. We see that he is denied by Judas. We see that he's not denied by Judas, he's betrayed by Judas and denied by Peter and abandoned by his three closest disciples. And so as we look at this text, as we look at chapter 14, again, it's a long one, but I want us to see a couple of things. We see that as he comes to prepare to be crucified, a lady meets him. It's at Bethany, and she anoints him with expensive oil. And actually the people say, why would he do this? Actually, some of the disciples, most likely Judas, who's about to betray Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, is like, why would she waste this money? We could have given it to the poor, AKA you could have given it to me and I would have taken some money from the bag and bought whatever I wanted. He was upset. But what I want us to see in the story of this woman who anoints Jesus with expensive oil is that when you're radically in love with Jesus, you do crazy things that religious people in the world might look at and say, man, what are you doing? But because you are so amazed, you are so overwhelmed by Jesus, you say, I'm going to do something amazing. And I know we talked about this at small group, but it reminds me of whenever I first started dating Alicia. I do crazy things. I'd wake up in the morning to bring her Starbucks. I'd spend all my money on an engagement ring when I had no money. My friends wouldn't understand. They'd be upset of, why are you spending all your time with her? What about us? But they didn't understand how much I was in love with her. And similarly, when we have a love for Jesus, we should love him in such a radical and an extreme way, willing to do amazing and big things for Jesus that others would look and be like, what's wrong with them? Wait, why would they do that? Isn't that a little crazy? And it might look crazy to them, but we know it's not crazy because we know Jesus is worth it. But again, looking back to Judas, the one who would betray Jesus, he's the one who was upset that this woman wasted this expensive oil. And so this same Judas goes and betrays Jesus. He meets with the religious leaders. He gets 30, doesn't say it in Mark, but we see in other gospels, he gets 30 pieces of silver to betray Jesus. And we'll see he'll come and kiss Jesus on the cheek, which is a term of respect, and calls him rabbi, which is another term of respect, showing like this is the guy, which it was really even more hurtful considering he's saying this is Jesus, this is my rabbi. He kisses him, but he's really betraying him. And I think it can be really easy for us to look at Judas and get frustrated, to condemn him, to be upset. And I think that's rightfully so. He deserves that. But how often do you and I betray Jesus? How often do we sell out for just a cheap thrill of being on our phones and social media or looking at stuff we shouldn't? How many times do we betray Jesus so we can be in on a little gossip and drama behind someone's back? How often do we betray Jesus because we want to make our lives about ourselves and not him, right? We may not have betrayed him and put him on the cross. Well, actually we did. That same sin that we betray him with today is one of the reasons why he went to the cross 2,000 years ago. Your sin, every time you willfully decide to disobey God's word and disobey Jesus, you are betraying Jesus. You and I are no better than Judas. Obviously, Judas committed the ultimate betrayal. Obviously, Judas is condemned before God. We see that in this text. But we have to see we are a part of the problem too. We betray Jesus every single day. So Jesus is betrayed by one of the 12. He's betrayed by Judas. And he knows because he's God. And Jesus knows that he's not only about to go to the cross, he is about to be punished by the Father for every sin that has ever been committed by his people. He knows what he's coming up against. He knows what is happening. So we see after he does the Lord's Supper, after he washes their feet, he goes to the Garden of Gethsemane. And in the garden, he's troubled. And in the garden, the disciples are all there. He takes his three closest, John, Peter, and James. And he says, hey, come with me a little closer. And he's honest with them. Look at verses 33 through 37. And he took with him Peter and James and John and began to be greatly distressed and troubled. And he said to them, my soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch. And going a little further, he fell on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. And he said, Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will. So Jesus is struggling. He's hurting. So if you're hurting, Jesus knows what you feel like. If you have something that you're dreading, like going back to school or maybe a conversation with a friend or something, guarantee you it doesn't compare to what Jesus was feeling. So Jesus can identify with your struggle, with your pain. And what did Jesus do? He prayed. He submitted to God's will. But notice he took 3 friends with him. Now, there's a powerful lesson in that. Find people you can trust. Find people who will love you. And he didn't even ask them to pray at the beginning. He just asked them to be present, to be with him. Maybe you have a friend who's struggling. Just be with them. You don't have to have all the right answers. You don't have to say the right thing. You don't have to do anything special. Be with them. That's all Jesus was asking of James, Peter, and John. But they let him down. Judas betrays him. His 3 closest disciples abandon him in his moment of need, which is another reminder. People can't sustain you. People can't fix your problems. Friends aren't everything. They're good, but ultimately you need something better than a human that can let you down. And so Jesus is here and he comes back, and we read in verse 37, and he came and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, Simon, are you asleep? Could you not watch 1 hour? And so we get this picture of Judas. Judas betrays Jesus in a despicable, awful way, which again, we do all the time. And then we have his friends who he called them to just be with him, and they can't even stay awake. And yet again, I look at that, and that's a picture of me. How many times do I make these big decisions for God? God, I'm going to read my Bible every day. I'd go to camp in high school and middle school, and I'd be like, God, I'm going to live for you. I'm going to do all these amazing things. And I'd get home and I'd just kind of fall asleep, abandon Jesus. Right? Last week, Jesus said, stay awake, focus on him. And yet his disciples abandon him in his time of need. How often do you and I do that? God, I want to do big things for you, but I want to go be cool with my friends. God, I want to be so on fire for you, but I don't want to give up time on my phone, and I'm going to abandon you for my phone. I'm going to abandon you for my friends. I'm going to abandon you for popularity. We betray Jesus. We abandon Jesus. See yourself in chapter 14. Yes, the disciples were immediately there and they failed, but you and I fail all the time, which brings us to Peter. Not only did he fall asleep on Jesus, before they went to the garden, Jesus said, Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times. Actually, all of you are going to scatter. And Peter's like, not me. Impossible. Jesus is like, it's possible. Peter's like, no. Jesus says, before the rooster crows 2 times, you will have denied me 3 times. Peter and the disciples are like, never going to happen. Well, as soon as Jesus is arrested in the garden, all the disciples, including Peter, disappear, which they said they would never do. And then we see that Peter denies Jesus. And look what happens. Verses 71 and 72. Peter's denied Jesus 3 times, but the last one, but he began to invoke a curse on himself and to swear, I do not know this man of whom you speak. And immediately, there's that word, immediately God convicts him. Immediately, Peter, the rooster crows a second time. And Peter remembered how Jesus had said to him, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. And he broke down and wept. It can be easy to condemn Peter, but we deny Jesus for our own desires. We deny Jesus for our friends. We deny Jesus for popularity. We just deny Jesus for our selfish pride all the time. But I want you to see Peter's response. And he broke down and wept. He was saddened over his sin. He was saddened to the point of tears. He was on his knees, repenting. He realized he was wrong, and he was running back to Jesus, which is huge for you and me. Because again, like Judas, we betray Jesus. Like the disciples in the garden and at his arrest, we abandon Jesus all the time. And like Peter, we too deny Jesus because we are broken sinners. And maybe that's you. Maybe you're denying Jesus. Maybe you're betraying him. Maybe you're abandoning him right now. What is our response? To break down and weep. To repent. To say, God, I don't want to betray you. I don't want to abandon you. I don't want to deny you for my desires, for fleshly things that won't last. I want you. So let's learn from the mistakes of the people here in chapter 14. And let us relentlessly and radically pursue Jesus like the woman with the alabaster jar who broke it and everyone thought she was crazy. And yet all these people who've been with Jesus would leave him and desert him. Be like the woman that everyone thought was crazy. Be radical for Jesus and learn from the mistakes of those who betrayed him, abandoned him, and denied him. And if we do that, I guarantee you we will grow closer to Jesus.